Now, there are a lot of people who do not understand why Donald Trump is this week yet again treating Ukraine like dirt, betraying it and sucking up instead to Russian war criminal Vladimir Putin, president of the Russian invaders, even though Putin this week still kept on trying to murder Ukrainian civilians with his rockets. Now, Trump's negotiators this week told Russia it could keep almost everything that its army has so far taken in Ukraine in 3 years of fighting. Ukraine will get no security guarantees if Russia then later invades the rest of it, and Ukraine will also have to hand over minerals to the US. It's an amazing sellout. And Ukraine's President Zelensky said, well, for one, he could never accept what Trump was offering Russia, legal recognition that it now was in control of Ukraine. Right? It's just extraordinary. So this is after, Ukraine has actually fought back so hard after the Russian invasion that 900,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded. So really, Ukraine is winning, but Trump hit the roof. He said, look, this statement that you can't accept, Russian control over Ukraine is harmful to the peace negotiations with Russia. No one's asking Zelensky to recognize Crimea as Russian territory, but if he wanted Crimea, why didn't they fight for it 11 years ago when it was handed over to Russia without a shot being fired? It's inflammatory statements like Zelensky's that make it so difficult to settle this war. Look, this guy never attacks Putin, does he? Never attacks Putin. Honestly. Now, Russia's, in fact, though, the country refusing to agree to a ceasefire. What's more, it's losing this war. Yet here comes Trump forcing Ukraine, in effect, to surrender or else. And you ask, why? Why? Europe is horrified, doesn't understand. Well, here, Andrei Illarionov, he was Putin's chief economic advisor for 5 years. And he said to Trump, Ukraine is nothing. Ukraine is nothing. And Trump, he says, thinks giving it to Russia is going to convince Vladimir Putin of something impossible, that he would drop his alliance with China and join the Americans instead.
By giving this gift to Putin, Trump is hoping that he would be able to create a new alliance with Putin, or at least to try to get him from China.
And, forget the Putin lies repeated by American conspiracy theorists, tools of the Kremlin like Tucker Carlson, that Ukraine started this war by wanting to join NATO, a provocation, a threat to Russian security. No, fact is, Putin is simply an ultranationalist, just like Hitler, and using the same Hitler kind of excuses for war.
It is not related with NATO or Ukraine in NATO membership or this map to NATO, nothing. It was imperial ideas of Mr. Putin when in year 2003 he proclaimed that he has territorial claims to Ukraine.
That's a man who knows Putin intimately. Joining me is Dr Michael Lawriwsky. He's an author, he's a former academic, he's a former chair of the Ukrainian Studies Foundation at Monash University and a former trustee of Melbourne's Shrine of Remembrance. Michael, good to see you again. Donald Trump is sending his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, the worst diplomat in the world, to go see Putin on the weekend. Where is Trump's so-called peace push actually going?
Well, I think it's the problem is that Witkoff and the Americans don't understand what this war is all about. It's not about Russia gaining 20% of Ukrainian territory and Ukraine not being part of NATO. It's about destroying Ukraine completely, capturing Kyiv and effectively eliminating the Ukrainian people as a nation. That's what it's about. That's why there won't be a ceasefire from Russia. In fact, a couple of days before the Oval Office incident, we saw that Lavrov came out and said, look, it's against our constitution to actually cease fire because there are these cities of Kherson and Zaporizhia which are now under the control of Ukraine, but Russia thinks that they are part of Russia, and it's in their constitution that they can't cease fire until they get those. And that's the thing they put to Witkoff, and Witkoff has been saying, oh, it's all about these 4 regions where they voted to be with Russia, well, that's just nonsense as well. These referenda were just a farce. So he's been spreading this disinformation about what the war is all about. There's no way that Putin is going to allow 900,000 or how many it is Russians to die. The amount of weapons that have been destroyed, etc., of Russia. And just walk away with 20% of Ukraine. What he wants to do is continue to attack Ukraine, and therefore the peace treaty that he wants would be one that keeps Ukraine defenceless and not able to reply to a new invasion by Russia. That's what it's all about.
Well, there may be a ceasefire, but I think it will only be so Putin can get America to walk away while it quickly rebuilds and then attacks again. That's all that'll be. Now, Trump's Vice President J.D. Vance says the US now could just walk away if it can't get peace. I just wonder, though, who actually does that threaten most? I mean, Ukraine would lose a major weapons supplier, of course. But then Russia might lose its best chance of getting what it couldn't take by war. And also, the Europeans may step in, although obviously they need to really crank up their own weapons production.
Yes, the Europeans really do have to crank up, and that's one thing that has been good about this. But the thing is that the United States produces or provides something like 25 to 30% of Ukraine's weapons at the moment, but they are a very important 25 to 30%, and other countries are trying to substitute that. For example, the Japanese have announced that they're going to be providing satellite imagery. The Swedes are providing some AWAC planes that would be scanning the skies and that sort of thing. But they need Patriot missiles. And the Europeans have got $250 billion of frozen Russian assets, which they could really commandeer and provide to the Ukrainians so that they could buy the weapons from the Americans. However, we saw about a week ago that Mr. Trump said that he wouldn't even sell weapons to Ukraine. So it is really getting quite murky.
Now, there's one thing that the countries around Russia's border understand that Donald Trump does not. That is why Finland, which shares a long border with Russia, is now sowing the border with mines. It's why Sweden has announced it's going to build nuclear shelters for its people. It's why Latvia or Poland has increased its defence spending to an incredible 5%. They're all arming. They know what Trump doesn't, that if Russia does finally take over Ukraine, it gets Ukraine's army. And that's 600,000 people. It'll kill probably the officer corps or ship them off to prison or whatever. And it'll get Ukrainian weapons. And it will have an army ready right away for an invasion of whatever country it likes on its border. What do you make of that threat?
Well, I think it's very real. The German military has estimated that if Ukraine were to fall, Russia would be ready within 5 years to invade the rest of Europe. And probably the first countries to go would be the Baltic states, for example, where Lithuanians, for example, are now training in terms of evacuation personnel. They could snap them up pretty quickly. There's Moldova, and then there's Poland, which would be a harder nut to crack. However, when you look at the forces aligned, the Russians have in the field something like 220 brigades. Ukraine has about 110 brigades, and the whole of Europe combined only has 80 brigades. So this is a tactic that was used by the Mongol Golden Horde back in the Middle Ages, where they would invade a country and then they would use the people in that country as the first line of their next attack. And they have done that. They did that in World War II, the Russians. They also have done it more recently in eastern Ukraine, where they've captured those regions, those 5 regions of Ukraine, and they have conscripted those people and put them into meat assaults, leading to a very high casualty rate among those people. So yeah, they would definitely have by far the largest army in Europe. in 5 years' time, potentially.
Well, you know, people say, oh, well, he wouldn't attack a European country because NATO then, and they've got nuclear weapons. Wait a minute. Donald Trump is essentially walking away from NATO. He's got nuclear weapons. He wouldn't use them against Russia. And the only two countries are Britain and France who have nuclear weapons. Are they really going to use a nuclear weapon to defend Lithuania? I don't see that. And I think Russia doesn't see that. So they're so vulnerable. Michael Lawriwsky, thank you so much indeed for taking us through. Really, really appreciate it.